Hi, my name's Krippendorff. I'm the founder of Outthinker and the author of Outthink, the Competition. And I want to briefly overview what we're going to be covering in this course. I used to work at McKinsey, the consulting firm, and in 2004 I left to start my own firm. And we would go to companies and we would tell them, we can help you come up with very disruptive, innovative growth strategies. However, we found that we can get an individual to really think differently, but if you do it in a group, towards the end of the conversation, often someone will say something like, well, that won't work. And they'll lay out a very logical reason for why your disruptive strategic idea is impossible. This is why most strategies are ineffective or at best repeat past actions. So most strategies look like yesterday's strategies, but you try to do it a little bit faster, a little bit cheaper, a little bit harder. Most strategies look like we've been growing at 10%, could we grow at 12%? And the reason is that when groups get together to talk about strategy, the conversation is really designed to kill off different ideas. So about 5 years ago, I was washing the dishes in my kitchen and my son was playing with Legos. And here's a picture of him. He is 10 years old today. In this picture, he was 5 years old. And he was interrupting me as I was thinking about why can't we get teams, companies to think more disruptively. And he asked me to tell him what this thing is that he built, and I thought it was a tower. But he explained to me, no, this is not a tower. This is a rocket ship. It can go underwater, and it can pick up dinosaurs. And you can see he's just so proud of this thing that he built. And it was at that moment that I recognized him in a very different way. And it occurred to me that what he had just done was not unlike what these great business innovators do that we aspire to, right? They sit with the pieces they have, and they have the same pieces that you and I have, but then they stack them up in a unique way. They build something that is different. And they're not ashamed of the fact that what they've built is different. In fact, they know it's only that they built something different that they have the potential to change the future. And what that meant to me was that this way of thinking is not unnatural. In fact, it is innate to you and me. If you've played with Legos, if you've been 5 years old, you have thought this way. But I'd like you to ask, do you think this way as you're building your businesses? As you're building your strategies? Somehow in those domains, we don't think this way. But we can. We're capable of thinking this way and bringing this kind of natural innovativeness to strategy. So what we did is we looked at how do these great business strategists talk about how they think, and great social innovators whose innovations have transformed the world, and a new generation of innovators for whom there's more written, and we got to interview many of these people, and we took what they do naturally, their way of designing strategies, and we put it into a process. And that is the process that we're going to teach you in this workshop. So I'm going to give you an overview of the framework. The core concept in this approach to strategy is described by the innovators that we studied in various ways. Ray Kroc, for example, founder of modern-day McDonald's, he said, my attitude was that the competition can try to copy my style, but they can't read my mind. So I'll leave them 1.5 miles behind. What he's talking about is outthinking the competition. So you generate an innovative idea, and that innovative idea disrupts the competition in that it creates a certain strategic dynamic, a certain reaction among those who would copy or resist you. And again, they all describe it in different ways, but our favorite phrasing of this concept is that of Gandhi, who said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Let's break down what he's saying here. You need to do something out in the marketplace that those who would fight you or copy you will first ignore, and then they'll laugh at. You want them to ignore and laugh at you because as they're ignoring and laughing at you, what are you doing? You're building this thing. And by the time they wake up and say, wait a second, that thing that guy or that woman did is actually working, it's too late. You've already won. Today, what do we call that? We call that disruptive innovation. If you read the book Blue Ocean Strategy, you might call it the blue ocean. 2,500 years ago, Sun Tzu, the Chinese general that wrote The Art of War, called it taking whole. This is one strategic concept. It's been around for millennia, We've just called it different things over the years. And for this course, what I invite you to call it is the fourth option. So the fourth option is a metaphor, and it says there is a point at which others stop looking for new options. You'll hear them start repeating themselves. When you hear someone said, I know this industry, what you need to do is A, B, C. Or let me tell you how we've always done it. This is how it works. 1, 2, 3. Whenever you hear that, people have stopped thinking. And what these innovators do is they recognize that point, and then they look beyond the obvious and they look for the fourth option. Let me give you an example of a fourth option. We'll come out of today, come out of the business context for a moment, just to make sure you land this concept. So in ancient times in China, around 240 BC, there was a massive revolution underway. And there's one general that was given a critical challenge. His emperor asked him to take 50,000 men, or ordered him to take 50,000 men, and march across the kingdom, cross a river, and then quell the rebellion on the other side of the kingdom. Now, when he got to the river, he saw that 100,000 rebels had assembled on the other side of the river to stop him from crossing the river. And so he did what you and I do when we face a strategic challenge, a strategic river, if you will. He said, what are our options? Now, he decided they had three options. One option is they could go home and explain to the emperor, hey, I couldn't cross the river because there were people waiting for me on the other side. But what happens to the general who fails the emperor in 240 BC, right? He gets his head cut off, right? So he's thinking, hopefully this is a suboptimal option. What's my next option? Well, I could wait until the rebels leave. But it occurs to him that the rebels are never going to leave. They've achieved their mission just by being there. They're just trying to stop him from crossing the river. So he's about to conclude that if he can't go back and he can't wait, the only other direction is to cross. So he's going to order his men to wade through the water and attack the awaiting enemy. Now think about how you feel about that option. Is that something that you would pursue? What are the consequences of that? Well, you have a number of disadvantages if you were to try to cross the river. The first is that they outnumber you 2-1, right? The second is that if you get to the other side of the river, you're going to be fighting uphill. They're fighting downhill. A third one is that the river creates a disadvantage. It slows you down. It's unpredictable. And a fourth reason is that you're on the offensive. They're on the defensive. Defensive positions are almost always superior to offensive positions. So there are at least 4 reasons why you shouldn't jump in the river. Now, I shared this story under the term, the fourth option, right? So obviously he didn't pick one of these 3 options. My question for you, if you want to take a moment to think about it, is what would you do? What do you see as a fourth option? Think about that for a moment. Let me tell you what the general did. His fourth option was this. He ordered his men to take sandbags and they built a dam upriver. Then, when the water receded, he ordered his men to cross. Now, they've removed the river as a disadvantage, but they're still outnumbered, they're still fighting uphill, they're still on the offensive. So he ordered his men, without having given them forewarning, to run back to his side of the river. And what did the rebels do? Well, they followed him, of course. He waited for 50,000 rebels to get to his side of the river, while 50,000 were still making their way through the riverbank. And then, what did he do? Of course, he released the dam, he washed away half the rebels, and then he turned around to fight. Now let's look at his strategic situation now. He's no longer outnumbered 2-1, he's evenly matched 1-1. He's no longer fighting uphill, he's fighting downhill. He's no longer on the offensive, he's on the defensive. And the river creates a disadvantage to them because they're backed up against the river. He's turned a situation that he couldn't win into one that he couldn't lose. He found a fourth option. That's what you are going to look for. And the methodology is going to teach you how to find these fourth options. The fourth option is at the core of all breakthrough strategies in all domains. In 1968, Dick Fosbury jumped over the high bar backward. Before that day, and he won the Olympics, before that day, everyone had gone over forward using one of 3 techniques. And he wins the Olympics. 8 years later, 90% of high jumpers are doing what's now called the Fosbury flop. But there are 2 things I want to point out about this case. The first is that there is no new technology that appeared in 1968 that suddenly made this possible. Why didn't someone do this 4 years before, or 8 years before, or 12 years before? What is new is just the concept. And it's not till that concept is named, Fosbury flop, that it starts being adopted. That you can start finding trainers to train you in the Fosbury flop. You can look at articles or papers or books on the best practices for performing a Fosbury flop. So what I'm going to argue to you is that what holds back your strategy is not new technology or new capabilities. What's holding you back are new concepts. So when I study strategy, I look at the flow of concepts over time. And really, strategy has evolved through 3 different phases. It started off being strategic planning, which is about coordinating. Then it became about competitive advantage, which was about doing something that your competitors won't copy for a long time. Then it became about disruption, fighting disruption, creating disruption. And what this methodology is going to do is going to show you how to live in the next era, how to get rid of disruption as a problem for you and turn it into an advantage for you. We're entering this 4th level of strategy. The second thing I want to point out about this case is that these ideas, these concepts, and the ideas that come out of these concepts that you're going to put into the marketplace, what will make them disruptive, what will make them something that your competitors will ignore and laugh at, is that they will be inconsistent with some prevailing logic or belief. Remember, we want people to ignore and laugh at us. They're going to ignore and laugh at us because your strategy is going to be inconsistent with something that they believe is true. And so what you're going to find is that there are people that are going to be smarter than you and I, more influential than you and I, that will tell us that these ideas are impossible. And that's the only indication that what you produce potentially could be a 4th option. Think of it, great ideas always create disbelief. Lord Kelvin of the Royal Society said, heavier than air flying machines are impossible. Harry Warner of Warner Brothers Pictures said, who the hell wants to hear actors talk before Warner Brothers produced the first talking movie? The CEO of Digital Equipment Corporation famously said, there is no reason for any individual to have a computer in their homes. A Nobel Peace Prize winner in physics said, there is no likelihood man can ever tap the power of the atom. And even our great innovator Thomas Edison said, the phonograph is not of any commercial value. So to produce the 4th options, you have to overcome this dilemma. There will be people who are smarter than you and I, that are more influential than you and I, that will tell us that the idea is impossible. And that is the only indication that potentially the strategy that you produce could have a disruptive effect on your competition. And the dilemma here is that if we're going to do something that's going to have that effect on our competition, on those who would copy us, on those who would fight us, they're going to laugh and ignore us because they hold on to a belief that is inconsistent with our ideas. And your team and you live in the same belief system as your competition, so these ideas will also seem impossible to you and your team. How do we overcome this dilemma?